お前はもう死んでいる。
Hey guys, today I wanted to share my dungeon build for the Tempest class, but I just wanted to have a disclaimer before we start the video. So with the last update, the difficulties have been condensed and we went from Inferno 6 difficulty as the max difficulty to Hell 3 difficulty. And with that, the combat rating for the difficulty has been changed, so it went from about 33,000 to 21,000. As well as this, the HP of the monsters has been greatly reduced, so it's actually a lot faster now to go through dungeons and run them if you're an experienced player. And what I can see is that a lot of players, myself included, are actually switching to a more open world based speed farming build inside dungeons compared to an actual dungeon build. So this is what I'm going to show in my video. I haven't gone for a very high DPS setup. I've just gone for something that's more speedy and more closely related to my open world farming setup. In the future, once Blizzard adds more difficulties and the game becomes a bit harder, I probably will be updating this guide and giving it a bit more damage, but for now it just feels like I can just go through and one-shot everything with this build while moving at a very decent speed. So this is the build that I came up with. For the skills, I'm using Rolling Surf, Flowing Strike, Crosswinds, and Storm Fury. And these are the essence that I'm using, so I'm going to go through this very quickly because I've already shown this in my open world farming video. It's quite similar to it, but there are some differences. So for the helmet, we're using the Rolling Surf. Critical hits give you increased damage. This is the Unyielding Vision helmet essence, a very good one. For the chest, I'm using the Merchant Scale, which gives you an extra Zephyr when you use Rolling Surf, and also gives you Rolling Surf cooldown. And the important thing is once this essence is awakened, it gives you another extra 10% cooldown on top of Rolling Surf, which will allow you to have 100% uptime of Rolling Surf, which is a very key essence. So I've had a lot of questions in my last video about this, about why I'm not running the Vortex essence, and it's because I just want to have this 100% uptime of Rolling Surf. With the Vortex essence, it would be very hard to get 100% uptime. Having Vortex is actually really good because you can also have the Armor Break Shoulders, which are really good in a party, but you don't actually need this extra damage in this build at the moment, so this is why I'm running the Merchant Scale, and I feel like this works a lot better for me. For the shoulders and pants essence, I'm using both essence that buff Flowing Strike. So the first one for the shoulders gives an additional Zephyr when you use Flowing Strike, so it will give you 2 Zephyrs once you use Flowing Strike, and it also gives you Flowing Strike cooldown. And the pants will give you 19% increased damage when you use Flowing Strike. So if you don't have one of these essence for Flowing Strike, I wouldn't worry too much about it. You could always run the Breaker skill instead of Flowing Strike, and then run shoulders and pants for Breaker. So I think that the essence for Breaker are actually very similar to Flowing Strike, except the slots are just reversed. So Breaker has 19% extra damage on the shoulder slot, and for the pants slot you could always run the shield or the knockback effect, which will give you a bit more damage on Breaker and also gives you cooldown. Moving on to the weapons essence, I'm using Shriekworth and Hurricane Hitch for the Crosswind skill, and these are really good. I already showed them in my open world farm video. So for Shriekworth, it's giving you 4 extra blades when you hit an enemy, which will give you an increased AoE of Crosswinds. And Hurricane Hitch, what it does is that it causes your primary attack to unleash the Crosswinds. So as you spam your primary attack, both you and your Zephyrs will be using the Crosswind skill, which is really key to this build. For the other weapons, I'm using the Flooded Stream, which works with Rolling Surf and allows your primary attacks to become swirling whip strikes as you move. So this also makes the build a bit smoother to play. You could always switch this out to the other Rolling Surf main hand, which will give you a bit more damage. But I feel like that made my movement a bit more clunky, and I just wanted to go as fast as possible, so I kept this essence the same as my open world farming build. And for the last essence, I'm using the Zephyr increased damage, but to be honest, you could always switch this out to Sip of the Breath, which gives you increased attack speed when you pick up the Mist-Touch orbs, which might work a little bit better than this one. For the set pieces, it's really simple. I'm using 4-piece Vithu's Urge and 4-piece Gloom Guide, and this works really well with this build. I have 100% uptime of the Gloom Guide buff because I'm able to spam my Flowing Strike due to the low cooldown of it, so it works very, very well and gives me the extra damage buff. For the legendary gems, the ones to look out for are Bloodsoaked Jade, because this gives you extra damage and also the extra 10% movement speed, which will help you reach the 20% cap for your character. And then when you use Rolling Surf, you'll get an extra 35% on top of it, which will allow you to move at a constant 55% movement speed, which is really good inside the dungeon because you want to be moving as fast as possible. The other gems to look out for are Gloomcast, because we're constantly spamming our primary attack. The Echoing Shade, this gem is really good on this setup because you're constantly spamming your attacks and you'll be summoning the Shadow Clones, which gets buffed by your Storm Fury. It's 40% increase on their primary attack damage, and it will make this build do considerably more damage. If you don't have any of these gems, I wouldn't worry too much about it, and I would just go for whatever setup works for you and maximizes your damage. For the Awakenings, the main one that will really help you the most for this build would be the chest, which will give you the 10% Rolling Surf, like I already mentioned. Other than that, you can go for the shoulders, which will give you a 10% Flowing Strike cooldown. And then you can go for any Awakening, which gives you Rolling Surf damage. So that would be the Helmet and also the Flooded Surf main hand. So these two would be really good to awaken because they'll give you 10% Rolling Surf damage. And as you're in the Surfing form, your primary attack damage is actually your Rolling Surf damage. It's not going to be the Wind Edge damage, so it's really good to get the extra 10% rolls here. For the Paragon tree, it comes as no surprise that I'm using the Slinger tree. This just gives you the maximum damage potential possible. So I've actually gone for the setup which I mentioned in my Paragon guide video, which is 3 nodes in the Weaver tree, which gives you 6.5% crit and also 15% increased damage. And I've gone for 2 nodes in the Ranger tree, which can give you up to 8% crit and also 8% damage. But you won't be getting the maximum bonus out of these because most of the time you'll be relatively close to the mobs as you kill them. So if you're using the Breaker skill instead of Flowing Strike, you could always switch this Paragon setup up a bit to squeeze a bit more damage out, and you could take out the Gifted node as well as the Ranger tree nodes and go for the Duelist tree. So this will give you up to 5% damage and 5% crit, and then this node makes them stack up to 10 times, so it actually becomes 10% damage and 10% crit, and you'll still maintain the 2 bonuses of the Weaver tree. For those curious to see how much damage this build does, I'll be showing a 10-second damage rotation now, but bear in mind that this build isn't optimized for damage and you're more focused on going as fast as possible. So let's just go ahead and do a 10-second damage rotation here. And as you can see, it's still outputting a decent amount of damage. I think I peaked at like 3.5 there, but for a 10-second damage rotation, I did about 2.4 million damage per second, which is okay. So if you see my Crusader build guides, then this obviously pales in comparison to the damage numbers I was getting pre-patch, but you have to remember that the Tempest class isn't really going to be the main damage dealer, and where it excels is killing monsters at very high speed while moving forward through the dungeon, which is really good. And as you can see, it doesn't feel like I'm really lacking damage at this point until they introduce the new difficulties. Let's also have a quick look at the damage breakdown. So Rolling Surf does the majority of the damage. This kind of acts like the primary attack on this build, so I'm not surprised here. You can also see Flowing Strike is also doing a decent amount of damage, as well as the Crosswind skill. Storm Fury isn't doing any damage, but you have to remember that this is a buff skill, and I'll be talking a bit more about this and the mechanics of Storm Fury. But you can see here in the miscellaneous section that this 9.2 million is coming mainly from my pets and my Zephyrs, and this does a huge amount of damage, so this is why I decided on using the offhand essence, which buffs the Zephyr damage. So before we end the video, I quickly want to talk about the mechanics of Zephyrs and how exactly you can squeeze out the most damage. So if we take a look at the Storm Fury skill here, just to see what it does, it says it imbues your edges and weapons of nearby allies for 9 seconds, causing your primary attacks to unleash slashes of wind, dealing an additional 40% damage. So what this does is that it will give your allies, which include all of your Zephyrs as well as your pets, like for example the summons from the Echoing Shade, it will give them all this extra 40% damage. But what you have to do is you want to be casting this after you summon your Zephyrs. So we've got these 2 skills here, which I've put on the number 1 slot and number 2 slot, which is the Rolling Surf and the Flowing Strike. So the Flowing Strike, if you remember, it already summons 1 Zephyr. So it says conjures a Zephyr at your current location, and because of the Shoulder's Essence, it summons an extra Zephyr. So you'll actually be getting 2 Zephyrs from this one. And the Rolling Surf also actually gives you 1 Zephyr from the Chest Essence when you first press it. And if you take a look at the passive skill of the Tempest, you'll be able to see here that it says the maximum amount of Zephyrs you can control at one time is 3. So if you summon a 4th one, what it does is it will actually make one of them disappear, and it will give you a mistouch orb. So as long as you follow the skill rotation correctly, which I'll talk about, you'll have this maximum amount of Zephyrs, which is 3 at once, and you also have to remember that you'll be getting an extra Zephyr every time this mistouch passive skill procs. So I'll quickly go over the order that you want to be pressing your skills for the maximum damage. So first you want to press your Rolling Surf. That will summon 1 Zephyr, then the Flowing Strike will summon extra 2 Zephyrs, and then you want to press both your Crosswinds and your Storm Fury, and this, as you can see, they got buffed, and I'm also buffed by the Storm Fury buff, so I'm doing the extra 40% damage on my primary attacks, which is really good. And then if you summon any Echoing Shades, so as you can see here, I'll summon a couple of Echoing Shades from this dummy, and then if I buff them as well from the Storm Fury, you'll be able to see that they also get this buff here. So I have this Echoing Shade on the left here, I'll press the Storm Fury, as you can see, he's also got the extra 40% damage buff. So that's about it for this video, guys. Do give this build a try and let me know what you guys think. I will be having quite a lot of Tempest build guides coming out later today, probably a few hours after this video goes live. I will be showing the raids build, the highest damage build, as well as the PvP and also Trial of Hordes build. So if you don't want to miss out on those future uploads, then be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.